Hi there. I want to share something that happened the other day when I was talking with one of my daughters. She was freaking out about the chaos that just keeps spreading across the country. And, this is ridiculous and I can't stand this and on and on. And I said to her, "What do you expect? We're in a war." And she seemed a little surprised at that, like a little taken aback. So I explained what the war was, what the core thing was, and she seemed surprised. And after we were done talking, I thought, if she doesn't get it, if she can't put the big picture together, then there's probably other people out there who are caught in all the drama and they're not able to put the big picture together either. So I thought I'd put this out there and hopefully bring some clarity to a few more people. So we are in a time of great change, and that's being felt by everyone as a time of great confusion. Why? Because we're in a war, and it's a war that doesn't look like any of the wars we've ever seen on TV or in the movies. Who's fighting this war? The globalists are on one side, and Donald Trump is on the other. Trump promised to drain the swamp, but there are many swamps in many countries. So maybe we could just call this the swamp war. In the swamp war, the globalists want a free trade system in a world where borders are irrelevant and cultures are homogenous. Donald Trump wants a system of trade where borders are respected and cultures are unique. Globalists want to make rules that supersede the constitutions of every country. And Donald Trump wants to strengthen those constitutions. Globalists want small populations. They keep trying to reduce the population, and they want that population to be managed by technology, kind of transhumanist in nature. Donald Trump wants populations that are free and well-to-do. Globalists want their big international corporations to make and control all the money. Donald Trump wants those big international corporations to spread that money around a little bit and serve the populations that work in them. The globalists have been slowly and carefully setting up their control mechanisms for over 60 years. 60 years. That's a whole lifetime for some people. Very few people recognized what was happening, so nobody challenged them. And anyone who did challenge them, they were simply disposed of until Donald Trump came along. The Make America Great Again movement, MAGA movement, looks and sounds like something only for Americans, but it's really an attempt to rally the great spirit of the American people to stand behind him and hold the fort while he works to fight the globalist takeover. So this is the war in a nutshell. We've all been watching the fight escalate since 2016. That's an entire decade now. A lot of people are struggling with war fatigue. When it just goes on and on and on, you get to this point where it's like, I can't stand it. I just want it to go away. I want it to stop. When you can't identify the problem or the core fight or what's actually happening, then you're going to end up striking out in every direction, kind of blindly. And that wastes energy. And it results in serious war fatigue very quickly. Some believe that Donald Trump is the problem and what kind of president he is. Others believe that it's about Republicans versus Democrats or liberals versus conservatives. Some think the problem started with a rigged election. Just fix that election and you could fix everything. Others think it was the masses of illegal immigrants that have flooded the country. And others are half panicky about what's happening with the financial system and the growing financial debt. Lots of people think the problem is Russia or China or the Ukraine war or Venezuela or Iran, while others say, oh, it's all Israel's fault. So let's look at these issues a little more deeply. First, though, be aware that every single one of these problems is only a media sideshow, a distraction, a means of creating deep divisions between and among people so that nobody really knows what's going on. This is the same playbook used to start every war. Agitate the people, create a dramatic false flag, assign the blame, and the fighting begins. The Democrats are players who have aligned themselves with the globalists for various reasons, some unwillingly, but trapped by Epstein. Some Republicans are in a similar trap because many of them have been bought by donors and lobbyists. They've become addicted to money and power. Liberals leaning heavily toward globalism are naive. They think life would be better for all if we had a more socialist system. But socialism doesn't work because the nature of the human being prevents that from working. Humans are creative, and the creative nature of the human is what gets shut down in a socialist system. When creativity, inventiveness, and entrepreneurship die, so does civilization. Conservatives want things to return to normal, which amounts to returning to what they've always done or always known. They want things to settle down, but that's not going to happen. This is a serious war, a life and death war. And since they are not prepared for serious change, they fight the liberals because they think the liberals are the problem. As for the rigged elections, we all know the 2020 election was rigged. Even the people who deny it know this. But the bigger problem is that every election has been rigged since the Kennedys were assassinated in the 1960s. And that includes a lot of state and midterm elections as well. We don't have either a democracy or a republic if we don't have honest elections. But people don't have any idea of how to evolve the system, so they just keep trying to do the same old things and do them harder. The masses of illegal immigrants were sort of an in-our-face invasion that most people think was an attempt to bring votes for the Democrats, but they were really to bring votes for the globalists and to be available to riot, protest, and help with the color revolution now unfolding everywhere in the US. I'm not sure about Europe, but in the US, immigrants were paid to come here, paid to stay, and paid to show up for protests, such as the No Kings protest and the protests in Oregon and now in Minnesota. Those who are very uncomfortable and uncertain about the future of the financial system have good reason for their uncertainty because both sides, globalists and Trump, need a new and different financial system. The globalists need a digital system so they can control the money and the population. Donald Trump needs a digital system because it's the only way to shut out the cartels, stop the child trafficking, and get rid of bought and paid for politicians. Trump is at war with a globalist system that has been in control of the entire banking system of the planet for over 100 years. For this reason, the banking system we all knew and understood, we were comfortable with it, must be taken down. And something new has to be put in its place. Therefore, don't panic. There will be a plan for a new system, but you'll have to decide for yourself whether to trust it or not. Another problem people stress about is Russia and the war in Ukraine. The real problem is the globalist insistence that the war keep going. They keep insisting on this war because this is an active attempt to take out the US and Russia at the same time. By getting the US to send billions of dollars to Ukraine, the US will end up bankrupt. By getting them to send endless shipments of weapons, the US would be left defenseless. Both of these maneuvers, of course, fill the pockets of the globalists, and eventually, they hope, will exhaust Russia, effectively killing two birds with one stone, the US and Russia. The problem is not China either. I've talked about China a number of times, and I've said that the globalists had moved all industry to China in order to gut the US capacity to manufacture what it needed while increasing corporate profits at the same time, because labor was cheaper in China. Once China was completely caught up in the money system, which is the main globalist weapon, the plan was to take out the Chinese government and run the world from Asia for a while. However, today there is uproar in China and fighting at the very top. Xi Jinping took out two of his top generals, and this triggered great fear in the remaining generals. They realized they could be next, even if they had done nothing wrong. The result has been a deep split in their military, one side defending Xi and the other side saying he's got to go because he's dangerous. This has resulted in tanks, gunfire, and bombs in Beijing, maybe as we speak. It was still going on the last time I looked. Back in 1999, I wrote in my book, Robes, that China would suffer the same fate as the US, and that waves of anger among their people would result in the breakup of China. Now it looks like this may be starting. Then there is the issue of Donald Trump himself. People complain that he doesn't talk like a president should talk, and he doesn't behave in a refined manner. However, if you're going to fight a war with swamp rats, you're not going to succeed with refined manners and sweet talk. War is messy, it's fierce, and it requires swamp rat smarts. Trump is all of these. He's also been cunning enough to walk a fine line and pretend to go along with some globalist directives, but only because it allows him to stay close enough to know what's happening on the inside. If you watch what he actually does, it is the absolute minimum to keep himself alive and out of an assassin's line of sight. He's just kind of barely kind of showing, okay, let's do a little of this and do a little of that, just so that the globalists will stay off his back. This was evident in Iran and Venezuela, both of which were operations planned in full cooperation with each country's government. Why bother Iran? Why are the globalists after Iran? Because Iran has a huge amount of gold, precious metals, and jewels, and many ancient documents, as well as a strategic location along the east side of the Persian Gulf. Why bother with Venezuela? Alex Craner suggested that it was just to keep it out of the hands of the globalists, and I think he's right. Venezuela is right across the Caribbean from the U.S. southern borders. Trump's already struggling with many border issues. This includes California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Oregon, Minnesota, New York. Why all these border states? Because if the globalists can get control of these places, they can create a siege-like condition that brings us to our knees. What are they using to create the siege? They're using drugs. I talked about this briefly in my January Look-See last month. The globalists are flooding the U.S. with methamphetamine, fentanyl, cocaine, and other drugs in the attempt to collapse the will and the finances of the American people. As I pointed out, it's the same plan used by the British in the opium wars against China. Billions of dollars worth of drugs have been flooding into our country, and nursing homes for the elderly, daycare centers, car repair shops, trucking companies, and various warehouses are being used to move or hold the drugs and the money until the drugs get to the street and the money gets to the banks doing business with the cartels. Of course, the big banks are all owned and operated by the globalists. Their headquarters are in London. And as I have pointed out in the past, they control the U.S. and Israel. And this brings me to Israel. It's not surprising that the globalists have set up the Jews to be the fall guy for everyone to blame and to hate. The Jews already had a history of being rejected, persecuted, distrusted, and forced to live in ghettos. The globalists are masters of deception and deflection, and the Jews were the perfect target. All of the frustration and anger that should be going to the globalists and Netanyahu is going to Israel. Israel is completely controlled by the globalists, and Netanyahu is their man. I think Trump sees this, sees that the people are good, they're decent, and this is the main reason he is sympathizing with Israel. He doesn't like Netanyahu, but he does care about the Jewish people. Personally, I think the Jewish people who are not Semitic at all were people who were displaced from Tartarian homelands before it was erased. I think they were handed a made-up story about their roots, and in their desperation to have a history that was significant and meaningful, they swallowed that story, that made-up story, completely. However, their anger at having been erased comes out in the form of arrogance and an attitude that looks down on Goyim, ordinary folks. In spite of the difficulties they have been through, their knowledge, their technology, and advanced science is amazing. In bringing this to a close, you can see how divided we are by how much disagreement there is regarding what to do to resolve anything. We can't even come together enough to agree on the problem that needs to be addressed. This is the result of deliberate manipulation of attention and the scattering of inflammatory seeds that sprout into argument. We've all been watching the chaos spread without any idea of how to make it stop. And here's the truth. It should not be stopped. Let the chaos makers take themselves out. Donald Trump has made some progress against the globalists, but people don't see this because they are caught up in the media sideshows. If the globalist elites control all the big corporations and they fire everyone in order to replace them with robots, who's going to buy their goods and services? Even if universal basic income is handed out, it will not do much more than keep people alive and maybe fed. We aren't talking six-figure incomes here. UBI is not going to give anyone a luxurious lifestyle. This will cause big corporations to shrink because of their own greed. Money does not make a world. People do. Once you have enough money, more does not bring happiness. The wild array of things going wrong are the result of deep, ugly decisions and activities. Those who thought they could control others by making exorbitant promises of power, money, and then demanding that the people who took that power and money prove their cooperation by seriously violating or harming helpless Others are fools. The bottom line is that a very fierce war is going on for control of the world. The players are the globalists anchored in London on one side, and on the other side is Donald Trump and the America First people. So don't get caught up in all of those sideshows. Yes, they do need to be resolved. There are problems, but hang on to your energy. Save some of that energy, because we will have to make a new world pretty soon here. Okay? Take care.